시청자 여러분 안녕하십니까? 2020 세계경제금융 컨퍼런스 특별방송 진행을 맡은 유일호입니다. 한국경제TV는 매년 전 세계의 경제 석학들을 모시고 세계 경제의 다양한 이슈를 살펴보고 문제점과 해결을 모색해보는 컨퍼런스를 개최하였습니다. 하지만 올해는 전 세계를 강타한 코로나19 사태 여파로 정부의 대규모 행사 자제 요청과 참석자 여러분들의 안전을 고려해서 특별 생방송으로 대체하게 되었습니다. 먼저 이번 컨퍼런스의 기조 연설자로 모실 예정이었던 로버트 베로 하버드 경제학과 교수를 미국 현지와 직접 연결해서 화상으로 대담을 진행하겠습니다. 베로 교수님 안녕하세요.
Thank you. It was nice being involved in this program in South Korea, and I hope to be in South Korea in person at future events.
네, 코로나19라는 팬데믹 충격이 세계 경제에 일파만파 큰 충격을 주고 있습니다. 세계의 공장으로 불리는 중국을 시작해서 글로벌 공급망이 연쇄 충격을 받고 있고 여기 한국, 싱가포르 등 신흥국 경제뿐 아니라 미국, 일본, 유럽 등으로 가히 상상할 수 없는 경제적 충격이 몰아치고 있습니다. 이에 향후 글로벌 경제는 이 충격에서 쉽게 벗어나지 못할 것이다라는 우려도 커지고 있습니다. 코로나19라는 예상치 못한 변수가 세계 경제에 미치는 영향은 현재 어느 정도이고 또 어떤 후유증을 가져올 것으로 예상하십니까?
Well, the best lesson I've gotten from trying to think of how big the economic impact could be from the ongoing pandemic is to learn from the experience from 100 years ago when we had the great influenza pandemic, which affected the whole world. We've done a lot of research on this. We estimate that it killed 39 million people worldwide, and it had very substantial economic effects, which were on the order of 6 to 8% in terms of the contraction of the real gross domestic product. If you apply that in the current environment, you get a loss in world GDP of at least $5 trillion. So this is a very substantial economic contraction, more or less comparable to the Great Recession that we had in 2008, 2009, which affected most countries in the world.
네, 신종 코로나 바이러스가 빠른 속도로 전 세계로 퍼지면서 세계 각국이 위축된 경기에 활기를 불어넣기 위한 다양한 부양책을 내놓고 있습니다. 현재 각국에서 쏟아내고 있는 정책들을 어떻게 평가하십니까?
You know, the first line of attack in response to the coronavirus has really been basically to cut real gross domestic product, to prevent people from interacting and from basically producing goods and services, particularly in certain sectors. For example, those related to travel and hospitality are particularly impacted. But basically, it's a voluntary kind of supply shock, reducing effectively the productivity of the world, and thereby designed to reduce interactions and to slow the contagion and the spread of the disease. So this might make sense. It might be worth it to lose a lot of economic output in the short run in order to escape from the worst effects of the pandemic. But then some of the policy responses are puzzling in that context. If you're trying to reduce GDP and the interactions related to that, it's not clear why you want to have government policies that essentially offset that response. So some of the policies, such as stimulating monetary and fiscal policies, I think don't make much sense because on the one hand you're trying to curb GDP, and on the other hand you're doing stimulus, which you usually do to try to raise aggregate demand and thereby raise GDP. So there's a certain lack of coherence in terms of some of the policies that are being followed.
앞서 말씀해 주신 각국의 주요 대책들을 나눠서 평가해 볼 때 트럼프 미국 대통령은 근로소득세 감면이나 직접적인 현금 지급 등 한마디로 소비자의 가처분 소득을 늘려서 소비를 진작시키겠다는 정책을 취하는 것으로 보입니다. 미국의 이러한 부양책의 실효성에 대해서 동의하시는지, 혹시 동의하지 않는다면 또 그 이유는 무엇인지 말씀해 주시기 바랍니다.
This is one of these kinds of fiscal responses that I was just referring to. It's basically an attempt to give people more disposable income to use to raise their demand, particularly for consumer purchases. And it's therefore offsetting the initial policy, which is actually trying to curb GDP and economic activity. I think the payroll tax cut is better than just giving people money, which is one of the prime focuses in terms of proposed policies today. At least you're cutting a form of tax which is distorting for economic activity. But the fact is the payroll tax is one of the least distorting taxes that we have available, and it's not one of the best taxes to cut if you're trying to cut. So I don't think it's a very reasonable policy plan.
앞서 말씀드린 대로 즉각적인 효과를 기대하고 현금을 지급하자는 방안도 나오고 있습니다. 일부 국가에서는 이미 국민들에게 직접 현금을 지급하는 재난소득에 대한 정책이 구체적으로 논의되고 있기도 하고요. 이것에 대해서 일부 경제학자들은 또 이런 정책들을 적극 지지하고 있기도 합니다. 그런데 교수님은 이에 대해서 어떻게 생각하시는지요?
Well, it's similar to what I was discussing before. It's a very extreme kind of fiscal stimulus designed to raise demand for goods and services. I think it's not a very sensible policy. The government really should be focusing its activities on things directly related to the problem of the pandemic. It makes a lot of sense to be doing things, to be increasing the supply of medical services and equipment, and to be funding research, and to be looking for things that can help with respect to the disease. These other plans are, I think, just going to make problems worse. I think it's important to have a kind of social safety net. Of course, we have a good deal of that already in place, particularly in the form of unemployment insurance and health insurance provided to poor people through the Medicaid program. It's not as though we don't have programs in place that are already intended for poor people. It's okay to do some more of that in terms of the current emergency crisis, but it can't be the main policy intended to counter this difficult problem of the pandemic.
네, 다른 질문을 하나 드려보겠습니다. 민주당의 유력 대선 주자인 조 바이든 전 부통령은 부자 증세를 카드로 꺼내들었습니다. 세금을 줄이고 돈을 푸는 그런 그 앞에서 설명드린 방식과는 다른데 이에 대해서 어떻게 생각하시는지요?
You know, Joe Biden and the Democrats have wanted to raise tax rates on the rich, going back all the way to Ronald Reagan in the 1980s, who reduced the marginal tax rates at the top of the income distribution in particular. Democrats are basically using the current crisis as an excuse to do what they always wanted to do, which was have even higher tax rates on the rich. The proposal is to go back to marginal rates at the top above 70%, depending on which state you're located in. In California, for example, the state income tax burden is added on very substantially to the federal one. I think we learned in the 1980s under Reagan that it was very counterproductive to have these high marginal tax rates at the top. And by cutting them, in fact, we had a great economic success in terms of non-inflationary economic growth that was achieved in the 1980s, and we seem to have forgotten that lesson.
네, 엄청난 경제적 타격이 예상되는 팬데믹 사태 앞에서 각국에서 준비하고 있는 이와 같은 대책들은 어떤 하나의 공통점을 가지고 있다고 생각이 됩니다. 바로 부양책의 규모와 비례해서 어마어마할 정도 규모의 부채 증가가 뒤따를 수밖에 없다는 점입니다. 막대한 부채 증가로 예상되는 후폭풍, 또한 만만치 않을 것으로 생각이 되는데 이에 대해 어떻게 평가하시는지요? 미국을 사례로 들어서 말씀을 해주셔도 좋겠습니다.
One problem with the current administration, and President Trump in particular, is that he doesn't worry at all about having enormous expenditure and borrowing enormous sums in order to pay for that expenditure. He doesn't have the typical Republican reluctance to carry out massive fiscal deficits and resulting in the accumulation of vast amounts of debt in relation to the gross domestic product. So he's following that general policy in the current environment. He doesn't hesitate to propose these really reckless, enormous programs, which is what he's doing currently, and basically giving people money and paying for it by printing pieces of government paper in the form of borrowing. It's been very surprising for a number of years now that we have avoided high inflation, given that there's a policy that results in a lot of debt and a lot of money creation. So I admit that I'm surprised we haven't already had inflation, but that's really going to be seriously tested with the current policies, because what's being carried out should be highly inflationary. And I'm very worried that we're finally going to get this big burst of inflation, which is then going to be very difficult to reverse. And I would not be surprised if the current administration reacted to that by putting in widespread price controls, which would really be disastrous.
네, 이건 좀 아주 다른 질문인데 이번 미국 대통령 선거에 대해서 교수님께서 어떻게 생각하십니까?
Frankly, I think we have two terrible candidates, given that it looks like it's going to be President Trump running against Joe Biden. I've not had a high opinion of Joe Biden, I would say, for 30 years. He's frankly not very intelligent. And now he's also gotten a lot older and seems to exhibit a lot of signs of senility. But I have to say he's much better than Bernie Sanders as a candidate, because Sanders is really basically a committed communist. So Biden looks better than that. The choice between Trump and Biden is a difficult one, because I don't think either of them will be very good as president, which we've already seen under Trump. And I don't think Biden will be a very good choice. So obviously I'm not very happy about this, but if Bernie Sanders had been nominated, that would have been even worse. If you'd asked me that some weeks back, I would have said that Trump had a very high prospect of winning. According to the betting markets, he was at least 60%, 65% probable to win re-election. But that was before the current crisis, and I think he may suffer a lot, particularly because of the declines in the stock market and likely in the economy. And I think he's going to end up taking some of the blame for that, even if perhaps he shouldn't be blamed for this particular crisis. I think so. I don't think I can give you precise estimates of that, but I think it'll be a substantial negative, given that the strong economic outcomes has been the main foundation for the popularity that President Trump has had for some years. I think in some areas his policies have been very sensible, particularly in terms of taxes and regulations. I think he's been a disaster on international trade, particularly in terms of tariffs related to China and other countries. But now he's going to end up, I think, being blamed for this pandemic effects. And in terms of some of the proposed policy responses, he deserves to be blamed for those parts of it.
네, 선거 얘기는 그만하고 본론으로 다시 돌아와서 부채 문제와 관련해서 많은 전문가들이 민간 기업의 부채가 이후 세계 경제에 커다란 블랙홀이 될 것이다, 이런 예상을 합니다. 팬데믹 사태가 발생한 이후 이미 수많은 기업들이 생산 활동의 위축과 영업 활동의 단절을 호소하고 있습니다. 이 같은 상황이 지속된다면 많은 기업들이 신용경색에 빠질 위험이 높아질 것인데, 특히 이제 질 낮은 기업 부채가 계속 쌓이면은 기업 생존에 더욱더 치명적이고 파괴적인 요인이 될 것으로 예상이 됩니다. 이에 대해 어떻게 평가하십니까?
I think we're definitely going to see increased involvement of the government in terms of guaranteeing loans and guaranteeing that companies won't go bankrupt, particularly in critical sectors such as the airlines or Boeing, which is related to the airlines. I think this is likely to be true in hotel businesses, other industry related to the hospitality business. I think we're going to see widespread intervention of the government in these areas. Some of this actually makes some sense because you don't want key sectors of the economy to basically collapse due to short-run problems related to bankruptcy issues. But no doubt the government's going to go too far and is going to get too much into the business of picking winners in terms of which sectors to bail out or subsidize in certain ways.
예, 좀 다른 측면에서 접근해 보기로 하겠습니다. 이미 세계적으로도 과잉 부채 이슈는 커다란 논란거리였고 또 선진국들을 중심으로 저금리 또는 마이너스 금리 정책까지 오랜 기간 이어져 오는 바람에 일각에서는 더 이상 중앙은행의 통화 정책이 효과를 찾아보기 힘들다. 그런 회의론마저 나오고 있습니다. 이런 시점에서 최근 각국은 또다시 앞다퉈서 전격적이라 할 수 있는 금리 인하를 단행을 하고 있는데 현 상황에서 이와 같은 통화 정책으로 기대하는 효과를 얻는다는 것이 가능하다고 생각하십니까?
I've been critical in the past on these policies of having extremely low interest rates, and particularly coming out of the Great Recession 2008-2009, I thought it was important for example, the U.S. Federal Reserve to be raising rates back to a more normal level. It took several years for them to start on that path, and after not too long a period, they basically gave up and they stopped raising rates. And then we had this enormous reaction just recently, cutting rates back down to zero. In general, I don't think it's a good idea for the central bank to be creating these artificially low interest rates. So I don't like it in general, and I don't like it in the current environment. And as I mentioned before, the main idea usually behind these rate cut policies is to stimulate aggregate demand and to raise real GDP by doing that. And in the current setting, we don't seem to really be wanting to do that in the context of trying to stem the contagion of the pandemic. So again, it's cutting at cross purposes with regard to what the intent is of the government with regard to reacting to the current crisis. As you mentioned, it's not just a matter of the United States. It's been a typical practice, particularly of developed country central banks, recently to be pursuing these very low interest rate policies. So although I focused my remarks on the U.S. Federal Reserve, it's something that applies much more broadly, for example, to the European Central Bank, which has gotten into the same business.
예, 통상적인 재정정책, 통화정책과 함께 보다 이른바 적극적인 통화정책이라고 볼 수 있는 양적 완화 정책도 다시 시작이 됐습니다. 미국 연준이 이미 엄청난 규모의 양적 완화 프로그램을 시작하기로 했고 유럽 역시 비슷한 정책 시행을 발표했습니다. 과거 금융위기가 해소되면서 이런 양적 완화가 종결될 것이다 이렇게 예상이 되었는데 이것을 다시 재개하고 있는 이러한 현실을 어떻게 평가하십니까?
Of course, as quantitative easing arose, once the central banks, such as the Federal Reserve, cut rates down to zero or close to zero, so they didn't have the conventional monetary tools available in terms of further interest rate cuts. You could go a little bit negative, which the U.S. hasn't done, but you can't really go very much negative. So QE arose, particularly coming out of the financial crisis 2008-2009, as a supplement or alternative to the standard policy of cutting rates. So again, in the current environment, it's basically supplementing the rate cuts. I don't think the rate cuts were a good idea, and I don't think that the further QE is a good idea. It's all about monetary stimulus, and I don't think that's actually the appropriate response to what amounts to a supply shock. This is really as though you had an oil price shock or lower productivity. And the correct response of that is not actually for the monetary authority to be stimulating the economy, to be cutting rates, or to be doing more dramatic QE. If anything, what they should have done is actually raise interest rates in response to this shock. But of course, that wouldn't have been even contemplated.
예, 더 나아가서 일부에서는 정부의 재정 적자를 중앙은행이 직접 돈을 찍어서 해결하자는 목소리도 나옵니다. 이와 같은 주장의 위험성은 없을까요?
Well, the classical danger from this kind of policy is inflation. And until the last, now it's a decade or more, that was the primary worry. And somehow we've escaped having high inflation for a long time, really going back to the policies that Paul Volcker followed in the 1980s under President Reagan. And since then, inflation has not been the major problem that it was for decades before that. The big danger now is that we're finally going to get back to a bout of severe inflation. And you would expect a dramatic increase in terms of government debt and in terms of government money, that would be inflationary. And if we were to create inflation in the current setting, it would be extremely difficult to reverse that. As it was in the early 1980s, it was very difficult to get out of the chronic inflation that we had in the period before that. So the big concern now is we're going to return finally to that environment. And then my prediction would be, as I mentioned before, that this president in the US is likely to turn to extreme price control measures, which we haven't seen since Richard Nixon in the 1970s in the US, which was quite a terrible policy and very distorting. And I wouldn't be too surprised to see many major countries following price control type policies if we end up with a big bout of inflation, which is the danger of the current policies being pursued. Well, I think he's done a terrible job in that respect because he's completely reckless with respect to government spending and financing that spending by printing either bonds or money. He doesn't think there's any cost to having the government borrow. He doesn't think there's any cost to having the Federal Reserve create more money. And so far we've been very lucky because we've escaped inflation despite these kinds of expansionary policies. But what's being proposed now is something completely unprecedented and different from what's been pursued previously, for example, in the US. It's much more aggressive. And if there's ever going to be inflation in response to these kinds of reckless policies, we're going to see it coming out of the current actions that are being taken. So I would say in that regard, it's very reckless and it's a very poor form of policy that Trump is following here.
다음으로 금융시장의 한 축이라고 할 수 있는 증권시장에 대한 문제도 짚어보기로 하겠습니다. 전 세계 증시가 이미 충격적인 급락, 급등을 반복하는 상황을 보여주고 있습니다. 이러한 주가 급등락에 따른 충격이 어느 때보다도 심각한데 이것을 불가피한 상황으로 봐야 하는지, 증시 안정을 예상할 수 있는 어떤 그런 징후를 무엇으로 판단할 수 있는지, 그리고 더 나아가서 향후의 증시 전망은 어떻게 보시는지에 대해서 말씀해 주시기 바랍니다.
You know, looking at the stock market today in the US, and this would apply also to other countries, I think the expected return from investing in the stock market today is very high, but it's also extremely risky because the volatility that we're seeing is almost unprecedented. So if you're willing to gamble and take a serious chance of losing a lot of your money, the reward in terms of expected return is also extremely high today. I don't think the markets are going to calm down until it looks like we've got a handle on this underlying crisis related to the pandemic. If it looked like we were getting ahead of the pandemic along the lines of achieving a reduction in the rate of new infection, maybe coming up with some kind of treatment that looks promising, or the virus on its own tending to die out, particularly as we get into the summer, then I think the financial markets will rebound very strongly and very quickly. but it's going to have to look like we're getting a handle on this crisis. And there are positive signs, but there's also still a lot of danger. I suppose a couple of the biggest positive signs are that China and South Korea, which were particularly early in terms of getting hit by this pandemic, seemed like they may have turned the corner in terms of at least reducing dramatically the rate of new infection. So that's very positive in terms of looking to what's likely to happen in the future for other places. On the other hand, in some European countries, the situation just seems to be getting worse. That would be true, for example, for Italy and Spain, which at the moment seem to be the worst places in terms of what's being experienced.
코로나19 사태로 글로벌 기업의 설비 투자와 소비 감소가 생기고 이에 따라 주가, 부동산 등 전반적인 자산 가격의 하락이 발생하고 이것이 다시 추가 투자 축소, 종업원의 임금 삭감 등으로 이어지는 이른바 자산 디플레이션 현상이 발생할 우려도 커지고 있습니다. 결국 그 실물 자산인 부동산 가격에도 충격을 줄 것이라는 예측도 나오고 있는데 이에 대해서는 어떻게 생각하십니까?
Real estate, I think, is much more complicated here. If you go back to the 2008 crisis, which involved the bankruptcy of Lehman Brothers as a triggering event in the United States and in the United Kingdom, that crisis was triggered by real estate markets, by declines in prices both of residential and commercial real estate. So that was at the center of that crisis, and then a lot of what happened after that was really derivative from the real estate decline. This event is completely different from that. This event has nothing to do with the real estate markets. And if there's an effect on real estate prices, it would be derivative from the underlying shock in terms of the pandemic itself and what's gone on in the financial markets related to that, particularly stock prices and bond prices, as I've discussed. But the effect on real estate prices is uncertain. On the one hand, people have less income and less wealth. That's going to reduce their demand for real estate. You'd expect to see a decline in real estate prices. But on the other hand, real estate is a real thing, and it looks now like it's a much better alternative to financial claims than it would have looked like if you considered the situation some months ago. So that might raise the demand for real estate because it looks better to be holding that kind of real property rather than to be holding stock market claims in particular. So that part would go in the opposite direction. It's basically a substitution away from other claims and toward real estate. And that's offset by the income type effect that I mentioned before. So I'm not sure that the net effect from all this is to predict a decline in real estate prices. It's not obvious that that will be the accompanying force in terms of real estate markets today.